Dawn breaks blood red over the Philippine Sea. October 25, 1944. The water is glass calm, reflecting the crimson sun like a mirror of fire. 6 small escort carriers churn through the Pacific, their decks alive with the morning ritual. Planes warming up, crews sipping coffee, men writing letters home. They call themselves Taffy 3. Nobody knows that in 17 minutes they'll face the most powerful naval force ever assembled by the Empire of Japan. At 6:37 a.m., a young ensign's voice crackles over the radio from his patrol plane, trembling with disbelief. "I can see pagoda masts. I see the biggest meatball flag on the biggest battleship I ever saw." Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague thinks it's a mistake. It has to be. The Japanese fleet was supposed to be miles away, crippled, retreating. His escort carriers are floating airfields made of thin steel and hope, not warships. They're shepherds, not wolves. Their destroyers carry 5-inch guns that might as well be pea shooters against what's coming. Then the horizon erupts in rainbows. Pink geysers, yellow fountains, blood-red columns of seawater taller than buildings, hurled skyward by shells the size of Volkswagens. The Japanese have marked their death with color, each battleship painting the ocean with its own signature dye, so spotters can tell whose shells are hitting. It's beautiful, it's terrifying, it's mathematically impossible to survive. The destroyer USS Johnston breaks formation. Her commander, Ernest Evans, a Cherokee from Oklahoma who once told his crew, "I intend to go in harm's way," doesn't wait for orders. He points his ship's bow directly at the largest battleship in human history and slams the throttle to flank speed. What happens next will be called impossible, suicidal, the greatest naval bluff in warfare. Because 3 American destroyers and 4 destroyer escorts are about to charge 4 battleships and convince the Japanese admirals they're facing the entire United States Third Fleet. If you want to witness courage that defies physics, hit that subscribe button. This is the story they thought was too unbelievable to be true. To understand the miracle, you need to understand the trap. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, historians would later call it the largest naval battle in human history. By October 1944, General Douglas MacArthur has returned to the Philippines as promised, wading ashore with 130,000 troops to liberate the islands from Japanese occupation. But the liberation is fragile, held together by a thin shield of ships and prayers. The Japanese High Command knows this is their last chance. They devise Operation Shogo 1, a desperate, brilliant plan that reads like fiction. Vice Admiral Gisaburo Ozawa will sail 4 nearly empty aircraft carriers north of the Philippines as bait. The Americans will see carriers, the most valuable targets in the Pacific, and Admiral William Bull Halsey's powerful Third Fleet will chase them like sharks to blood. Meanwhile, Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita will lead the Center Force, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, through the San Bernardino Strait and slam into the exposed American landing beaches from behind. 4 battleships, including Yamato, the largest ever built. Her 18-inch guns can hurl shells 25 miles. Each projectile weighs as much as a small car. 6 heavy cruisers, 11 destroyers, 23 warships total, carrying enough firepower to level cities. All that stands between Kurita and the massacre of American troops is Task Group 77.4, 3 small escort carrier groups scattered off the Philippine coast, nicknamed Taffy 1, Taffy 2, and Taffy 3. They're not combat vessels, they're flying gas stations. Slow, lightly armored baby carriers meant to launch ground support aircraft for troops ashore and hunt submarines. Top speed 18 knots. The Japanese cruisers can do 30. Taffy 3, the northernmost group, is commanded by Rear Admiral Clifton Ziggy Sprague.
6 escort carriers, 7 screening ships, none carrying guns larger than 5 inches. On October 24th, they watch American planes hammer Kurita's fleet in the Cebuyan Sea. The battleship Masashi, Yamato's sister ship, takes 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs before she sinks. The rest of Kurita's force appears to retreat westward. Halsey takes the bait. His entire Third Fleet, every battleship, every fleet carrier, races north after Ozawa's decoy. San Bernardino Strait lies open, unguarded, dark.
3 a.m., October 25th. Kurita's fleet passes through San Bernardino Strait in radio silence. The night is thick with fog and rain squalls. His ships nearly collide with each other in the darkness. The battleship Congo almost rams Yamato's stern. The admiral's staff expects American submarines, torpedo boats, anything. They emerge into open water at 3 in the morning. Nothing. The sea is empty. The Japanese sailors can barely believe it. After 3 days of savage air attacks, after losing Musashi and watching her crew of 2,400 men vanish beneath the waves, after submarines torpedoed 3 cruisers in the Palawan Passage, including Kurita's flagship, forcing him to swim for his life in oil-slicked water, they expected hell at the strait's mouth. Instead, silence, darkness, the gift of an undefended passage. Kurita turns his fleet south, hugging the coast of Samar Island. By dawn, they'll be in position to execute the plan. Find the American transports at Leyte Gulf, massacre them, turn MacArthur's invasion into a slaughterhouse. The war might not be won, but it can be prolonged. Maybe enough to negotiate terms. Maybe enough to preserve some honor in defeat. Aboard Taffy 3, 60 miles east of Samar, the carriers prepare for another routine day. USS Fanshawe Bay, USS St. Lo, USS White Plains, USS Kalinin Bay, USS Kitkun Bay, USS Gambier Bay. Their planes are loaded with high-explosive bombs and rockets meant for ground targets, not naval combat. The pilots are trained to support infantry, not sink battleships. The screening ships take position around the carriers. 3 destroyers: USS Johnston, USS Hull, USS Heermann. 4 destroyer escorts: USS Samuel B. Roberts, USS Dennis, USS John C. Butler, USS Raymond. These are the small boys, the tin cans, the expendable escorts. Combined, all 13 ships of Taffy 3 displace less tonnage than the battleship Yamato alone. At 6:37 a.m., Ensign William Brooks spots ships on the horizon while flying anti-submarine patrol from USS St. Lo. He assumes they're friendlies. Has to be. Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet, right? He radios for confirmation. Then he sees the pagoda masts, the rising sun flags, the massive guns swiveling toward the carriers, and he realizes they're already dead.
Admiral Sprague receives the report, and his blood turns to ice. This can't be real. Kurita was supposed to be retreating. Halsey was supposed to be guarding the strait. The most powerful fleet in the Pacific was supposed to be 40 miles north, protecting them. He demands visual confirmation. Brooks flies closer, his hands shaking on the controls. I can see pagoda masts. I see the biggest meatball flag on the biggest battleship I ever saw. Sprague grabs his binoculars. The horizon shimmers in the dawn heat. Then he sees them, massive silhouettes materializing through the morning haze like prehistoric monsters. 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, destroyers fanning out like wolves. The mathematics are simple and horrifying. Kurita's main guns can reach 25 miles. Taffy 3's largest weapons, the 5-inch guns on the destroyers, have a maximum range of 7 miles. To even scratch the Japanese ships, they'd need to close within range first. Every single mile they advance will be covered by shells that can punch through 18 inches of armor. At 6:58 a.m., the Japanese open fire. Colored fountains erupt around the carriers, pink, yellow, blood red, white. Each battleship using dye-loaded shells so their spotters can track their own salvos. To the American sailors, it looks like some kind of terrible fireworks display, beauty marking death. The shells scream overhead with sounds like freight trains tearing through the sky. When they hit the water, they throw up geysers taller than the carrier masts. Sprague makes his first decision in what will become a textbook example of impossible odds. He orders the carriers to run southeast toward a rain squall 7 miles away. He orders every ship to make smoke, thick, oily chemical fog that pours from special generators and exhaust stacks. He launches every plane, armed or not, fighters with nothing but machine guns, bombers with depth charges meant for submarines, anything that can fly. Then he does something that will be debated by naval historians for 80 years. He orders the destroyers to attack. Not defend, not screen, attack. Charge directly at 4 battleships with torpedo boats. Aboard USS Johnston, Commander Ernest Evans doesn't wait for the order to reach him.
Ernest Edwin Evans was born poor in Pawnee, Oklahoma, 1908. Cherokee and Creek blood ran in his veins. He wore it proudly, though the other sailors called him Chief behind his back. He'd beaten impossible odds before, graduated from an all-white high school, joined the National Guard, transferred to the Navy, won an appointment to the Naval Academy without political connections, graduated in 1931 when Native Americans were still fighting for citizenship rights. On October 27, 1943, exactly 1 year and 2 days before this moment, he stood on the deck of USS Johnston at her commissioning ceremony in Seattle. Before the assembled crew, before God and the Navy, he made a promise. "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." Now, as 18-inch shells from Yamato bracket the carriers behind him, those words come due. At 7 a.m., before the official order to attack even reaches Johnston's bridge, Evans slams the helm hard to port and charges, alone. His Fletcher-class destroyer, 2,500 tons of welded steel and fury, pointing her bow at the Japanese center force like a switchblade challenging a freight train. His crew can see the shells coming, actual shells, visible in flight, tumbling through the air at 2,000 feet per second. Pink mountains of seawater erupt around Johnston as Yamato's gunners find their range. The destroyer is making 35 knots, wreathed in her own smoke, jinking left and right as Evans closes the distance. 5 miles, 4 miles, 3 miles. The Japanese heavy cruiser Kumano looms ahead, 14,000 tons of armor and guns. Evans keeps his course steady, threading through the colored geysers, and at 10,000 yards, 5 nautical miles, he screams the order, "Fire torpedoes!" Johnston heels hard to starboard as 10 Mark 15 torpedoes leap from her tubes, white trails converging on Kumano's bow. The fish run hot, straight, and normal, a perfect spread. 1 hits, then 2. Massive explosions ripple along Kumano's waterline. The cruiser staggers, slows, falls out of formation. First blood to the Americans. A destroyer just crippled a heavy cruiser. And Kurita's entire fleet notices. Johnston's success lasts approximately 45 seconds. Then the Japanese fleet concentrates fire on this one destroyer that dared to attack their battleships. The sky goes dark with shells. Evans knows he can't dodge them all. It's a question of which ones to avoid and which ones to take. At 7:10 a.m., a 14-inch shell from Battleship Congo smashes through Johnston's bridge. The explosion is cataclysmic. It shreds the pilot house, kills several men instantly, peppers Evans with shrapnel. His left hand is mangled, 2 fingers hanging by threads of flesh. Blood pours down his arm. More shells hammer the destroyer. A 6-inch round penetrates the engine room, destroying Johnston's power plant. Steam screams from ruptured lines. Men are scalded to death in seconds. The ship's top speed drops to 17 knots, then 10. Fire breaks out amidships. Evans wraps his ruined hand in his shirt, no time for sickbay, and keeps giving orders. He's bleeding through his uniform, but his voice never wavers. Behind Johnston, the other destroyers see what she's done and follow. USS Hull, commanded by Commander Leon Kintberger, charges into the formation and launches torpedoes at the battleships. USS Heermann, under Commander Amos Hathaway, positions herself between the carriers and the Japanese cruisers, taking hit after hit but refusing to break off. The destroyer escorts, ships never designed for surface combat, see the destroyers charging and follow. USS Samuel B. Roberts, a 1,350-ton destroyer escort with 2 5-inch guns, closes to 4,400 yards of the Japanese heavy cruiser Chokai. That's less than 3 miles. Her commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Robert Copeland, gets on the ship's PA system. This will be a fight against overwhelming odds, from which survival cannot be expected. We will do what damage we can. Samuel B. Roberts launches her 3 torpedoes. Sailors watch them streak toward Chokai. One hits. The cruiser shudders, lists, begins to slow. A destroyer escort, designed to hunt submarines, just bloodied a 15,000-ton warship. Then the Japanese battleship Nagato finds her range. The destroyers and destroyer escorts have accomplished something impossible. They've disrupted Kurita's formation. His ships are turning, dodging torpedoes, losing their firing solutions on the carriers. The rainbow fountains that were marching steadily toward the escort carriers have scattered, chasing the suicidal tin cans instead. Aboard battleship Yamato, Kurita and his staff are confused. This isn't making sense. The destroyers are too aggressive. The torpedo attacks too coordinated. The American doctrine they studied in War College said escort ships would screen and retreat, not charge battleships point blank. More confusing, through the smoke and rain squalls, Japanese spotters keep seeing ships much larger than they should be. The destroyers look like cruisers. The escort carriers look like fleet carriers. Some reports claim the Americans are making 30 knots, impossible for escort carriers, but nobody can verify through the smoke. Japanese fire control officers frantically try to identify targets. The colored shell splashes that should help are now causing chaos. With ships scattered and maneuvering wildly, whose shells are whose? The radio nets are overwhelmed with conflicting reports. At 7:50 a.m., USS Hull closes on what she thinks is a cruiser column. It's actually the battleships Yamato and Nagato. Both warships turn their main batteries on Hull, 16.1-inch guns from Nagato, secondary 6.1-inch weapons from Yamato. The destroyer is close enough that the battleships can fire nearly flat trajectory shots. It's like shooting a rowboat with a tank. The first shell hits below Hull's bridge. The explosion is catastrophic. Her forward engine room disintegrates, the generator is shredded, superstructure peeled back like a tin can. She develops a 10-degree list to port. Commander Kintberger, bleeding from multiple wounds, keeps his ship in the fight. With only one engine and no electric power, Hull's crew manually trains their guns and fires by hand. They pump out every shell they have, even as 40 more Japanese shells hammer the dying destroyer. At 8:30 a.m., with her decks awash and fires raging, Kintberger orders abandon ship. Hull rolls over and sinks, taking 253 of her 356-man crew with her.
But those 20 minutes bought the carriers precious distance.
The planes are making a difference. Every aircraft Taffy 3 launched and planes from Taffy 2 70 miles south are swarming Kurita's fleet like angry wasps. They're not equipped for naval combat. Most are armed with anti-personnel rockets, high-explosive bombs that won't penetrate armor, depth charges meant for submarines. Some pilots are flying attack runs with empty guns, no ammunition at all, just diving at Japanese ships to force them to maneuver. It's working. Japanese anti-aircraft fire fills the sky. Every ship is throwing up walls of flak. But the American pilots keep coming. They're skip-bombing cruisers, dropping depth charges that detonate in the water alongside hulls, strafing bridges with 50 caliber rounds that spark off armor but force officers to duck. Torpedo bombers with submarine hunting torpedoes make runs on battleships. The weapons aren't designed to sink capital ships, but they force evasive action. Yamato herself is forced to turn hard to port, away from the battle, dodging torpedoes for 10 full minutes. When Kurita's flagship finally straightens out and tries to rejoin the pursuit, the admiral has lost tactical control. His ships are scattered. His cruisers are chasing different targets. The smoke is so thick nobody can see more than a few hundred yards. Aboard USS Johnston, still in the fight despite catastrophic damage, Evans has moved command to the fantail, the rear of the ship, because the bridge no longer exists. He's shouting steering orders down through an open hatch to sailors manually turning the rudder by hand. No power, no communications, blood soaking through his makeshift bandages. His ship has one engine, maybe 5 knots of speed, but the 5-inch guns still have shells, and by God, they're going to fire them. Johnston intercepts the Japanese light cruiser Yahagi and her destroyer squadron trying to make a torpedo run on the carriers. Evans positions his crippled destroyer between the Japanese ships and Taffy 3. For 15 minutes, Johnston trades fire with ships that outgun her 20-1. Shells are falling like hail. The deck is littered with bodies. Fires burn out of control. At 9:10 a.m., a massive salvo strikes Johnston amidships. The destroyer's back breaks. She goes dead in the water. Evans knows. Every man on Johnston knows. This is the end. At 9:45 a.m., the commander gives his last order: abandon ship. The crew goes over the sides into oil-slicked water. They cling to debris, to life rafts, to each other. Many are wounded. Some are burned so badly the seawater's salt makes them scream. They watch their ship, their home, their fighting ship, settle lower in the water. A Japanese destroyer, Yukakize, passes close by the survivors. According to witness accounts that would emerge years later, something extraordinary happens. The Japanese sailors line the rails and salute, a gesture of respect from one warrior to another, even as Johnston slips beneath the waves. Commander Ernest E. Evans is seen getting into a life raft. Then he vanishes. Of Johnston's 327-man crew, only 141 survive the battle and the 50 hours in the water that follow. Evans is not among them. Whether he died of his wounds, drowned, or was taken by sharks, nobody knows. The sea keeps its secrets. He would posthumously receive the Medal of Honor, the first Native American in U.S. Navy history to earn it, and one of only 2 destroyer captains in World War II so honored. The citation reads, "By his indomitable courage and brilliant professional skill, aided materially in turning back the enemy during a critical phase of the action." But Johnston isn't fighting alone. USS Samuel B. Roberts is still in the battle. For 35 minutes, her aft 5-inch gun crew, led by gunner's mate 3rd Class Paul Henry Carr, has been pumping out shells despite the mount losing all electrical power. They're manually cranking the turret into position, manually loading each shell, firing as fast as human muscle can work the mechanisms.
The gun barrel is so hot it's glowing red. The breech is starting to cook off rounds prematurely. 324 shells fired. Then, at 8:51 a.m., a powder charge cooks off in the breech. The explosion is devastating. The entire aft gun mount explodes. Shrapnel tears through the crew. Paul Carr is nearly cut in half, his torso ripped open from neck to groin, organs exposed. He should be dead instantly. Instead, survivors find him clutching the final shell, begging someone to load it into the gun so they can fire one more time. He dies holding that shell, his hands locked around it so tight they have to pry his fingers loose. He's 24 years old. At 8:51 a.m., after firing every torpedo and nearly every shell she carried, USS Samuel B. Roberts takes 3 14-inch shells from the battleship Congo. The massive projectiles, each weighing 1,485 pounds, punch through her thin hull like paper. One penetrates the engine room. The other 2 strike amidships. The explosions are so powerful they lift the entire ship out of the water. Lieutenant Commander Copeland, watching his ship disintegrate around him, tries one final desperate maneuver. He orders all engines full astern, emergency reverse at maximum power. The destroyer escort shudders, her stern nearly going under, backing down just as a spread of 14-inch shells passes directly overhead, missing by yards. Then he orders flank speed ahead. Samuel B. Roberts lunges forward just as another salvo hits where she would have been. But there's no escaping the mathematics. More shells hit. The engine room floods. Fires consume the superstructure. At 9:35 a.m., Copeland gives the order to abandon ship. The crew goes over the sides. They watch Sammy B., the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship, roll over and sink. Of her 224-man crew, 89 are killed in action. Another 25 will die from wounds, exposure, or shark attacks over the next 50 hours before rescue arrives. Her wreck will be found in 2022, 22,916 feet below the surface, the deepest shipwreck ever discovered. Deeper than the Titanic, a tomb for heroes in eternal darkness. But even as Johnston, Hull, and Samuel B. Roberts go down, something impossible is happening. The Japanese are retreating.
At 9:25 a.m., aboard the battleship Yamato, Vice Admiral Kurita sends the signal that will haunt historians for decades. Rendezvous, my course north, speed 20. He's calling off the attack. The most powerful surface fleet Japan has sent to sea in World War II, still mostly intact, still capable of destroying Taffy 3 and reaching the landing beaches, turns away. The rainbow fountains stop, the massive ships slow, regroup, and withdraw north. On the American carriers, nobody can believe it. They're still afloat, still moving. The carriers have taken hits. USS Gambier Bay has been sunk, others are damaged. But the transports at Leyte Gulf are untouched. MacArthur's invasion fleet is safe. Why did Kurita retreat? According to his later accounts and the reports of his surviving staff, several factors converged in his exhausted mind. First, he believed he was fighting Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet. The American destroyers had fought with the aggression and coordination of a much larger force. The smoke screens and rain squalls made accurate observation impossible. Through the chaos, Japanese spotters kept reporting cruisers and fleet carriers when they were seeing destroyers and escort carriers. Kurita thought he'd stumbled into the main American fleet, with battleships somewhere beyond the smoke. Second, the air attacks were relentless. Every time Kurita's ships tried to form up for a coordinated assault, American planes forced them to maneuver independently. He couldn't maintain tactical control. The fleet was scattered across miles of ocean, each ship fighting its own battle.
Third, Kurita hadn't slept in 3 days. His original flagship had been torpedoed out from under him 2 days earlier. He'd swum through burning oil to survive. He'd watched the super battleship Musashi, supposedly unsinkable, take 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs before rolling over. He'd run through submarine-infested waters, survived massed air attacks in the Sibuyan Sea, and navigated the treacherous San Bernardino Strait in darkness. The man was physically and mentally at the breaking point. Fourth, he'd received no word from the Southern Force under Admiral Nishimura. Unknown to him, Nishimura's entire force had been annihilated the night before in Surigao Strait by American battleships in history's last battleship versus battleship engagement.
But there's a fifth reason that Kurita would never officially admit. He'd been psychologically defeated. 3 destroyers and 4 destroyer escorts had convinced him he was fighting an enemy many times their actual strength. The ferocity, the sheer audacity of the American attack shattered Japanese assumptions about American fighting spirit. War college doctrine said the Americans would retreat, screen, play defense. Instead, tin cans charged battleships. Destroyer escorts took on heavy cruisers point blank. Planes with no ammunition made attack runs anyway, just to force evasive maneuvers. The Japanese had been told Americans were soft, materialistic, wouldn't fight to the death. But here, in these waters off Samar, they'd watched American ships burn to the waterline and keep firing. They'd seen commanders position their crippled vessels between Japanese guns and the carriers they were sworn to protect. They'd watched men choose certain death over retreat. Kurita's staff officer, Rear Admiral Tomiji Koyanagi, would write years later, "On land or sea, retirement is the most difficult of all tactics to execute successfully. But the retiring tactics of the American carriers in the battle off Samar were valiant and skillful. The enemy destroyers coordinated perfectly to cover the low speed of the escort carriers, bravely launched torpedoes to intercept us, and embarrassed us with their dense smoke screens." That word, embarrassed. The Imperial Japanese Navy, which had started the war with the most modern carrier force in the world, had been embarrassed by escort carriers and tin cans. By 10 a.m., Kurita's fleet was steaming north. He would hover in the area for 3.5 hours, changing course repeatedly. North, west, southwest, back to west, then north again, unable to decide whether to return to the attack. But the will was broken. At 1:10 p.m., it was clear he was heading back toward San Bernardino Strait. The mission had failed. The transports at Leyte Gulf were safe. MacArthur's invasion would succeed. But the cost to Taffy 3 was catastrophic. 2 carriers sunk, 3 destroyers and a destroyer escort gone, over 1,000 Americans dead, comparable to the combined losses at Coral Sea and Midway.
The survivors cling to life rafts, debris, anything that floats. The water is thick with oil. Sharks circle beneath, attracted by blood and thrashing. Men with severe burns scream when the salt water touches their wounds. Others, in shock, simply slip beneath the surface without a sound. For 50 hours they drift. The tropical sun during the day burns exposed skin raw. At night, hypothermia sets in, despite the warm water. The human body loses heat faster than water provides it, and exhaustion amplifies the effect. Men hallucinate, seeing ships that aren't there, hearing voices of dead shipmates. Some drink seawater, which accelerates their descent into madness and death. Others fight off sharks. Not the Hollywood kind that attack in mass, but the patient predators that take the wounded one by one when nobody's watching. Group cohesion collapses. Strong swimmers have to make impossible decisions about whether to tie themselves to dying men who might pull them under. On October 26th and 27th, patrol craft and landing ships begin the rescue operations. Of Johnston's 327 crew, only 141 are pulled from the water. USS Hull, 253 dead from 356.
USS Samuel B. Roberts, 89 killed immediately, plus 25 more who die in the water, from 224 total. Hundreds more wounded, many with injuries that will never fully heal. The escort carrier USS St. Lo, which survived the surface battle, is struck by a kamikaze at 10:53 a.m., the first organized kamikaze attack of the war. The Zero fighter crashes through her flight deck and explodes in the hangar. Bombs and torpedoes stored below detonate in a chain reaction. The entire length of the carrier is engulfed in flames. 25 minutes later, she sinks. 143 men killed. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, after reviewing the battle reports, writes, "The success of Taffy III was nothing short of special dispensation from the Lord Almighty." Historian Rear Admiral Samuel Eliot Morrison is more direct. In no engagement in its entire history has the United States Navy shown more gallantry, guts, and gumption than in those 2 morning hours between 0730 and 9:30 off Samar.
The tactical victory at Samar had strategic consequences that rippled across the Pacific. Kurita's retreat marked the effective end of the Imperial Japanese Navy as a fighting force. The center force returned to Japan, but the ships mostly remained in port for the rest of the war. Japan had lost 3 heavy cruisers at Samar, Chokai, Chikuma, and Suzuya, plus 3 more severely damaged. Combined with losses from other phases of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the IJN had been gutted. They'd lost 4 carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, and 11 destroyers across the 4-day battle. Nearly 10,000 Japanese sailors dead. More importantly, Japan lost the Philippines. The Leyte invasion succeeded. MacArthur's forces would liberate Manila by March 1945. The Japanese southern supply line, oil from the Dutch East Indies, rubber from Malaya, rice from Indochina, was severed. The Japanese home islands were now effectively under blockade, cut off from the resources needed to continue the war. For the American Navy, Samar became legend. The battle was studied at Annapolis, analyzed in tactical reviews, held up as the ultimate example of fighting spirit overcoming material disadvantage. The ships were awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, the highest unit award for extraordinary heroism. Individual sailors received numerous Navy crosses, Silver Stars, Bronze Stars. Commander Ernest E. Evans received the Medal of Honor posthumously. His citation reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. The first to lay a smokescreen and to open fire as an enemy task force, vastly superior in number, firepower, and armor, rapidly approached. Seriously wounded early in the engagement, Commander Evans, by his indomitable courage and brilliant professional skill, aided materially in turning back the enemy during a critical phase of the action." In 1955, the destroyer escort USS Evans, DE 1023, was commissioned in his honor, sponsored by his sister. The ship served until 1968. USS Samuel B. Roberts earned a nickname that stuck, the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship. At the Naval Academy, in Alumni Hall, a concourse was dedicated to Lieutenant Commander Copland and the crew of Samuel B. Roberts. Today, the wrecks of Johnston, Hull, and Samuel B. Roberts rest in eternal darkness. Johnston was found in 2019 by explorer Victor Vescovo, lying 20,406 feet below the surface, at the time the deepest shipwreck ever located. In 2021, her hull number, 557, was positively identified. She rests upright, her guns still trained toward where the enemy would have been. Samuel B. Roberts was discovered in June 2022 at 22,916 feet, now the deepest shipwreck in history, deeper than the Titanic. Her broken hull lies in the perpetual midnight of the Philippine Trench, entombing the men who chose to charge battleships in a destroyer escort. Hull's wreck was located in 2024, completing the trio of destroyers that died at Samar. The men who survived carried the memory their entire lives. Many refused to talk about it for decades. Survivor's guilt, PTSD before it had a name, the weight of watching brothers die. Reunions were bittersweet, joy at seeing old shipmates mixed with grief for empty chairs. The last survivor of USS Samuel B. Roberts died on March 20, 2022, just 3 months before his ship was found. What happened at Samar defies military logic. 7 escorts should not have been able to stop 23 warships. Destroyers don't defeat battleships, yet they did. The secret was never a secret. Courage. Not the Hollywood kind, the real kind, the terrifying kind, the kind where you're absolutely certain you're going to die and you charge anyway, because the alternative is letting your friends die instead. Ernest Evans knew he was sailing into harm's way. He'd promised it at Johnston's commissioning. Paul Carr knew the gun would kill him, but tried to fire one more shot. Robert Copland told his crew survival cannot be expected, and they followed him anyway. Samar teaches us that technology isn't everything. Numbers aren't everything. Sometimes, just sometimes, pure human will can tilt impossible odds. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical and documented sources. The ships are real. The men were real. The courage was real. And the Japanese fleet, which should have massacred them all, turned away.